Hi, everyone, and thank you to those who have joined us today. Welcome to Nice Inform Best Practices, a live Q&A with Wilmac. Now, before I run through some housekeeping items, I do want to apologize if there was any sort of confusion surrounding the layout of this session. This platform, it keeps attendees in listen-only mode, meaning the best way for you to participate is through the chat function that's located on the right-hand side of your screen. Many of you submitted questions and topics beforehand, so we geared the content of our session today towards addressing those specifically. Those that we don't get to, though, we will make sure to follow up with you individually afterwards to make sure that your question is answered. Now, we believe that there's a lot of potential with this user group for future webinars and discussions, so this is just the start of something that we hope you can leverage to get the most out of your Nice Informed solution. So back to those housekeeping items. As I mentioned, all participants have been placed in listen-only mode, so your microphone is muted. This session is being recorded, so it will be available to watch on demand afterwards. Please participate by commenting in the chat window, as I mentioned, on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will also have a few poll questions for you today that you can interact with. And if we can't get to your question, we'll be sure to follow up with you afterwards. And then just a quick request that when the session is over and you exit the platform, please submit your feedback by answering the 3 survey questions that pop up on your screen. So I'll jump right into the presentation now by introducing our experts, which I'm sure most of you recognize. First of all, I'm Emily Miller. I am the Director of Marketing at Wilmac, and I'll be moderating the session today. Next up, we have Steve Sharp, one of Wilmac's Public Safety Sales Directors. Steve focuses his efforts on New York and Pennsylvania after over 16 years of working as a 911 Center Director. He was actually a Wilmac customer and used Nice Inform within his PSAP, so he has a very unique understanding of public safety users like you and how important it is to leverage all the feature and functionality available to you within Nice Inform. Now next to him, we have Mark Huber, our Director of Pre-Sales Engineering. Mark has been at Wilmac now for close to 25 years, and his knowledge of the public safety sector just continues to grow year over year. Mark knows the Nice Inform solution inside and out, and he'll be leveraging our demo system to walk through some of our best practices today. So as most of you know, these two have a very impressive amount of experience in the public safety space, so I'm really excited to see what they can offer you today during our session. Now, before we get started, I did say before that we received a lot of great questions and topics, but we narrowed them into 8 talking points that we'll walk you through today. We'll cover features available in different versions of Nice Inform. So if you're new to a certain feature, you want to hear more about it, we're happy to have that discussion with you offline. I will stop sharing my screen now and move us into the first topic. So the first thing that we're going to cover, and that we received quite a few questions on, was about redacting sensitive information like personal health information or witness addresses from recordings within Nice Inform. Steve, do you want to start us off on this topic?
Yeah, so while Mark pulls up the demo, one of the experiences that I've had, and the reason why we're covering this is because a lot of times you're going to actually have to redact a recording. In fact, it only happened a few times during my career. One of the specific instances is, especially after the new discovery law, when we have to provide all the recordings in New York State. We had someone who actually called 911 and she was hiding from her abuser, and she gave the location of where she was hiding. So we had to actually go in there and we had to redact that content, so that way when we turned it over as part of discovery, her location wouldn't be revealed to her abuser. Other examples are like personal health information. We support a lot of universities and healthcare institutes. So this is also very important, as well as for EMS agencies. So that's kind of why we wanted to walk through this little tool with Mark.
All right, thanks, Steve. So I have the Inform Reconstruction application up on my screen right now, and I've performed a search and found a variety of recordings. And I'm going to select one of these and show you how you would do a redaction on this recording. So I have it selected, and I'm playing through the recording, and I notice something that needs to be redacted from this recording. So what I can do is I can go up to the top here, and I can open up the redaction panel, and I can see a visualization of the audio as it's playing through the call. So I'm just going to pause it at this location, and let's say, for example, that this area right here is the protected information that I want to redact from this recording. I just used my mouse to click and highlight that section. You see it highlighted in blue. Then I just go up here to the top right and I'm going to hit the redact selection button. You see that this changes gray, and down here in the timeline view I see a little blue marker on that area of the recording indicating that a section has been redacted. Now you can redact multiple selections within the same recording. So if I move on down further in the recording, and let's say I want to also redact this section of the recording, I can do that as well. And now I see multiple gray sections up top and multiple blue markers down below. So now that these have been marked, and I do want to emphasize that I haven't deleted anything out of the system. All I've done is I've marked sections for redaction. So when I export these recordings out of the system, those will be redacted, but they're not deleted from within my Inform system. As far as what happens to those sections of the audio, you have a couple of options. So I'm going to go up here to my options page. First I have to hit stop, and then I can go to my options. And on the general tab of the options, there is an option for what happens when you save a file that has redaction in it. I can either have the redaction replaced with a tone, which would be, in this case, this would be a continuous tone for the entire redacted section, or I can simply replace with silence, or just put a 1-second tone at the beginning of each redacted section. Steve, anything else you want to comment on that?
No, I just checking the chat for any questions. But so far, as I said, I didn't have to use this very often, so it's just important to know that you can do that. And the other thing is, like later on, if you need to remove a section of redaction, it's just as easy as clicking on it, selecting it, and hit the little delete key.
Yep,
that's right there.
So I just clicked right on it, and you see it highlights which one I'm clicked on, and you can easily remove that redaction.
So, and as you said, we're not changing the underlying recording. All we're doing is just redacting it for when we export the information. So that was
right.
Pretty straightforward tool, but not used very often in my world.
Great. Thank you guys for that info. I'll move us now into the next topic that we received quite a few comments on, which is Nice Inform Organizer. So for some context, this tool helps you move quicker when your center is backed up with discovery requests. And I'll let Steve and Mark kind of lead the discussion around the clipboard feature specifically.
So as far as the clipboard is concerned, we were fortunate in my last organization to have Organizer and Clipboard, and this comes in really handy when you have really complex incidents. Like, for instance, we had an aircraft accident at one of our local airfields, and that incident lasted almost 12 to 14 hours, and I had to set aside almost 1,000 transmissions as part of that single incident. And what the clipboard allows you to do is you can find the specific recordings related to that incident, upload them to, put them on the clipboard to kind of set them aside, and then I was able to export them into Organizer. Because we had so many questions and so many topics that we're going to be covering, we're not going to get into how to manage Organizer itself, but we are going to show you how to get these recordings into Organizer so that you can use them later. And in fact, one of our later sessions we believe that will be helpful is covering Organizer as a product, but because not everybody has that, we wanted to make sure that we could show multiple ways depending on what version of Inform you have. So that way, and we're going to kind of go from the most complex to the easiest. And the reason why we're doing that is because we want to show you there's more than one way to skin a cat. And we'll start with Mark.
All right. So if you have the professional edition of Nice Inform, you will have the clipboard. And with the professional edition, you can add the Organizer as an option. So some of you may have this, some of you might not. If you don't, just bear with us. We are going to show you a different way that you can manage your recordings in a similar way if you don't have Organizer or the clipboard. So back to the search that I did before. I've searched across multiple resources and over a range of time. And of course, I'm getting many various recordings in my search results. Some of these are going to be related to the incident that I'm researching, and some of them are not. So what we want to do is we want to pick through this and get just the relevant ones for the incident that I'm working on. So as I'm playing through recordings, you may identify, for example, that this one here is part of what I'm researching. So with that selected, you see I have it highlighted in blue. I just clicked on it. I go up to the top here and I hit the Add to Clipboard button. And that adds that recording to the clipboard. And I can view the clipboard by hitting the button right next to it. And I can see now that I have just that one recording in my view. So turn off the clipboard view and it'll take me back to my results. And I can continue selecting recordings and adding them to the clipboard. Now you can do them one at a time like I just did, or you could do a multi-select and add multiple recordings to the clipboard at the same time. And I can do that either up here in the timeline view or down below in the list view, wherever I'm more comfortable working. So if I'm doing it up here in the timeline view, I can click on a recording. And then if I hold down the control button on my keyboard and click another recording, that multi-selects recordings. And you can see that there's multiples turning blue as I control click on each of those. Now I've selected 4 more recordings. And when I hit add to clipboard up top here, those 4 are being added to the one I added earlier. So if I go to the view here, I'll now see there are 5 recordings that have been added to the clipboard. Similarly, I'm going to do the same thing down in the list view. You can control click down here, just like I was control clicking up top, but you also have an option to select a range down here in the list view as well. So if I click on one of these and I want to select everything from that one down to say this one, if I hold down the shift button on my keyboard while I click the last one, it'll select everything in between my first click and my second click. So you see all of these have been selected. And when I go to add those to the clipboard, now I'm going to have a whole bunch of stuff when I go to my clipboard view. Steve, any context you want to add to that?
No, and it's good for you guys to kind of see this, because as I said, like when you're dealing with a really complex incident and you don't want to set aside just everything from that range, because like for my system, I recorded multiple like police, fire, EMS phone calls, and you don't want to just give them an entire time block, but you want to be very specific about what you're sending over to either the defense attorney or to an agency that may want to do training on. Like we would often, like if we had a structure fire, the fire company would say, hey, can you set aside the first 20 minutes? And so you would be able to just set aside that traffic that was associated with that fire call. So this is why it's a very useful tool that we used, especially once Discovery came along in New York State. So.
Yeah. All right, great, thanks for that. So for those of you who have Organizer, excuse me, let's do a transfer of everything on the clipboard to the Organizer where I can keep them permanently in the Organizer or semi-permanently so that I don't have to perform a search again later. I can simply go to the Organizer and find that group of recordings again easily. So I'm going to work from the clipboard, but you could do this just as easily from your search results. But I find it easier that if you move everything that you're working with to the clipboard first, it makes the transfer to Organizer a little bit easier. So from here, I'm going to use the transfer button up top, but before I use that, I have to select everything that I want to be transferred to the Organizer. So sometimes folks will click on this button and they'll go to add to Organizer and they'll wonder why all these options are grayed out. Well, that's because you haven't selected anything to transfer. So the easiest way to do this is to just use the select all button just to the left of that one, and you'll see that they all turn blue, both in the timeline view and in the list view. Now, when I go to transfer to Organizer, I'm going to use the wizard as the easiest way to do it. These options are all available here for me. So I'm going to choose Add to Organizer Wizard, and that's going to bring up a window where it takes me through a few steps to add this to the Organizer. And my first option is I can either create a new incident or add results to an existing incident.
And the really good value about adding something to an existing incident, say you've got a case or an incident, and then you find out, oh, I accidentally forgot a piece, like somehow I missed a piece. This is the part where using that clipboard and adding it back in, or you find that one extra recording. For us, again, based on my experience in New York State, there were some times where you had multiple days associated with an investigation. So the car was stolen on day A and it was recovered on day B, and we caught the suspect on day C. Well, you're not going to go through all 3 days. You're going to do searches based on those 3 different time periods, and being able to add those separate little instances of what happened, you're able to add it to Organizer like that, using the add to existing incident tool, which is very helpful.
Yep, thanks, Steve. So for our purposes, I'm just going to create a new incident, and I'll call it demo incident. I can give it an incident number. Most agencies will use like a CAT ID number, for example. So just put whatever is a meaningful ID number in there for you, and you can give it a description here as well. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about incident retention. By default in the Organizer, all incidents are available to be deleted by a user who has permission to do that. So usually administrators or your higher level supervisor, manager level users. But if you want to prevent an incident from being deleted, you can do that by enabling incident retention. And I can set a date for how long I want this incident to be retained before it's eligible for deletion. So if, for example, I wanted to keep this in the system for 3 years, I can simply change my date here to 2026, and now that will lock the incident in the Organizer and prevent it from being deleted until that expiration date has passed. Okay. My next window is going to ask me who is allowed access to this incident in the Organizer, and I can either select individual users or I could select a group of users if I want, either way. And you can also give those folks access rights. In most cases, you probably want to give them read-only rights, but you could also give these folks modify or full control rights. And that can be modified later on if you need to as well. Okay, and then next, it asks me what folder I want to put it in. I'm just going to use the default, say next. It's reviewing the details, and when I hit add, it starts transferring. And what it's actually doing here is it's taking a copy of those recordings and it's putting them into a special incident folder within the Organizer. And now I can see that demo incident in my list in Organizer. And if I double click that, it's going to look exactly like it did on the clipboard and in Reconstruction, just without the search pane over on the left there.
And as we said, we're not going to be able to get into the full capability of Organizer, but at this point, this is where you could add extra media like videos or add CAD incident data or your CAD call for service report. Those would all go in the related materials, but because we're so short on time, we're going to actually have to keep moving the process along. And so what we're going to do now is kind of shift gears to the folks that don't have Organizer on their thing, because we kind of, as I said, we wanted to make sure that everyone got some value out of this session. So we're going to go to the scenario export version.
All right, so if you're on the Inform Essential Edition or even Inform Professional without the Organizer, what you can do is you can save recordings as a scenario in a folder on your PC or out on the network or on a thumb drive or any standard Windows folder location. So I can do that either from the clipboard like I'm about to do here, or I could do that from the Reconstruction content. And if you have Inform Essential, that's where you'd be working. But those of you with Pro, I would encourage you to use the clipboard to your advantage by moving everything there first. It makes it a little easier to do the export because you're only looking at the things that you care about at that point. So again, I'm going to do a select all here. And then right next to that transfer button I was using, there's a save button. And if I click on that, I'm going to choose Save Scenario. And this is giving me a little notation about redactions. And when you're saving as a scenario, redactions are not included, only when you're exporting as WAV files. So this is just a little reminder that that's how it works for you. So I'm going to say yes to that. And then I'm going to choose a folder. I'm going to put this right here on my desktop and give it a name. Let's try not clicking on that, but clicking on this. There we go. Okay, and that's going to save it in a folder on my desktop. Just takes a couple seconds to make copies of those recordings. Okay, close that. And if I now navigate to my desktop, you're going to see that folder called Demo Scenario that I just created. And if you drill down into that, you will see that each recording has been exported as a standard Windows WAV file, which you could play from here without using Inform if you wanted to do that. You see that the file name includes the date, the time, the channel number, and there's some other data files that are included with this. But really, the intent of the scenario export is so that you can subsequently load them back into the Inform application in a manner similar to the way someone with the organizer feature would use it. So what I would do is I would go back into Reconstruction, and I would go to that same Load Save button, and I would choose Load Scenario. And here I can navigate to that folder that I created. Here it is, Demo Scenario. Say OK, and then OK again. And now it's actually importing the scenario and the associated data from that folder that I had created earlier. And now I can work with those just like I would work with them right from Reconstruction.
Cool. Now, I believe that there's also a way that you can look at the folder directly on your desktop and show some files, kind of export those as you showed earlier. One of the things is sometimes, and most of the time, we want to just get a 911 call and get it to the DA, or get a 911 call and get it to the agency. And there's a way faster way of doing it. And as I said, we kind of went from the most complex version to medium, and now we're going to go to the simplest version of getting a recording out of the system.
Yep, so this is just exporting as a standard WAV file. And I can select one or more recordings, and the system will export them as a single mixed WAV file. So I can select a couple of recordings here, maybe a couple from different resources and a few that are in sequence from the same resource. And I'm just using the same control-click method that we talked about earlier. And going back to that Load Save button, I'm going to choose Save Audio. Give it a file name and a location. I'm going to put it right on my desktop and call it Demo WAV. I have a couple of options here as well. So the audio format defaults to standard audio, which is pretty universal and the one I'd recommend that you use. This will play on just about any device, whether it's a Windows PC, a Mac, or even a smartphone or a tablet. All are going to be able to play standard WAV files. But you do have a couple of other options, such as Windows Media. Those files tend to be a little bit smaller, but they only work on Windows PCs. If you have video, you have the option of choosing MP4, or you can also use MP3 as well. But for our purposes, I'm going to choose standard audio. You can also check this box here, and what that will do is it will add a spoken date and time at the beginning of the recording. And then there's also a checkbox for automatic gain control. And what this does is if you have different volume levels amongst those recordings, some that are louder, some that are quieter, it's going to equalize everything to the same volume level. Steve, do you want to give a little context on when you might want to use that or not use that?
All right, so sometimes you'll get people asking, well, it was set on the recording, and why didn't the dispatcher catch that? Or why did the call taker miss that? And sometimes you want to turn off the automatic gain control so that way you're hearing it as it was recorded for the person who was answering the call, because sometimes information is really quiet or there's interference, and sometimes you want to turn that off, especially when you're trying to figure out, okay, did they hear it? And a lot of people forget that dispatchers are answering things in real time. So they've got people talking to them on the radio, they've got people talking to them on the phones or in the room. So one of the reasons why we turn automatic gain control off is so that way people have a better understanding of what the dispatcher was actually experiencing. Now, there are times when you want to turn it on, and that's like, for instance, we had an individual who called 911, and we believe that they that they had already committed a crime before that, and they were calling 911 to pretend that they had witnessed the crime versus actually committing the crime. So we actually were going to send it off to Quantico and the FBI, and then so we turned the automatic gain control on so they could hear all the background informations and do the behavioral analysis, which was pretty cool. But they were able to determine that the person was lying when they called 911. So that's the other reason why you would want to turn it on.
All right, thanks, Steve. So I'm going to click OK, and that's going to save that. Those 4 recordings are going to be mixed together into a single file on my desktop. So let's just navigate to my desktop and take a look at that. There's the file I just created right there. And if I double click it, it's going to open whatever my default audio player in Windows is and begin playing that call. In this case, I'm using Windows Media Player. And you won't hear the audio because we have that muted, but you will see that the audio file is now playing right on my PC. So you can share that with anybody who has a PC or whatever device supports WAV files, and they don't need to have Nice Inform.
Okay, keeping us on track now. We just went through the first 4 points. We're 26 minutes in. We want to stay on time, so but this is a good spot for us to pull up one of our poll questions. As I mentioned at the beginning, we believe that this presentation is kind of the first step in developing a user group, putting together more discussions, more opportunities for you, but we want to make sure that we're putting together topics that matter most to you, that you want to hear the most about. So for this one specifically, we want to get your input on what you'd be interested in hearing more about when it comes to advanced search options. So I'll pop that poll up on the screen right now. Should be coming up. So the question reads, what advanced search options would you like another session on? It is a checkbox, so you can select up to 3 of those options, which read Annie Alley, radio ID or radio alias, CAD incident number, advanced playback or results table, information balloons, and insight panels. So those are your 5 options. So you can go ahead, check whatever off you'd like to hear about, and then press submit. We'll pull those up in a second. All right, I see quite a few answers coming in. I always say we need Jeopardy music during these polls. Gotta get that situated. All right, a few more seconds, and I'm going to close that out. And let's show the results. Thank you all for your participation. So a pretty even distribution, but CAD incident number takes the top with 56%. Again, like I said, we're going to try to frame these topics towards your needs. So appreciate you answering that poll question.
Yes, thank you. That was awesome.
So we're now going to shift gears now into our last 4 talking points. Like I said, we'll try to get you out of here by 45. But we're going to shift gears into another great tool within Nice Inform, which is Evaluator. So I did want to mention again that we're talking about features that are available in certain versions of Nice Inform. So if anything piques your interest that you don't have access to in your current version, please reach out. We're happy to discuss more. So this topic was another popular one, and it's building and importing templates in Evaluator. Steve, care to start us off on this topic?
All right, so the folks who are using Evaluator, we actually had a lot of questions from them, and I mean, I think that one of the things that we realized based on the fact that we're using this format, what we are looking to do, we're going to cover briefly some of the easier questions, but I think for those of you who are using Evaluator, we may want to schedule a separate time where we have folks who are using it on like a Teams meeting where the customers can interact with each other. And that way we can get information exchange. But one of the things that we want to talk about is like some people when they're using Evaluator, they don't know where to get started. So we're going to talk about importing the forms. So Emily's going to throw up a link to how you can, the forms that you can import into Evaluator. They're the APCO NINA forms that were based off of the APCO NINA standard, developed back in 2015. I believe they just recently updated, but at the end of that standard, they actually had spreadsheets with questions, like best practice questions, and we're going to show how we can import those files into Evaluator. So we'll get on with
Hey, Mark, sorry to interrupt, but could you switch over to your Inform screen? Sorry,
Am I
we're
on the
looking
wrong
at
screen?
the wrong one. Yeah.
That's all
Sorry
right.
about that.
Yep, we're human. And while he's doing that part, one of the other things is like the other reason why we show the import tool is, say you have another agency that has forms that you like say Steuben wants to share its forms with Durham, or Durham wants to share its forms with Steuben, or you have a neighboring agency that's using Evaluator. This is an easy way to kind of steal the work that somebody else has already done and then adapt it to your specific agency. So that's one of the other reasons why I do this is you don't have to just start out with generic forms. You can steal or work with other people's, work with other people's things. Kind of like when I would go out to the listserv and say, does anybody have a policy on silent calls? And I would get like 4 responses, and it allowed me to kind of steal their work and make it my own.
Okay, so Emily, you've shared out those link to download those forms. So what NICE has done is they've taken those spreadsheets that were developed by APCO Nina, and they've developed them into templates, which you can easily import into NICE Inform and use that as a basis for building your own form. So I have those saved right here on my desktop in a folder called APCO Nina Forms, and here are the 6 of them. To import those into Inform, I'm going to go to this drop down here at the top and go to the template designer. And this is where all of my evaluator templates and question types are built. And I just have to go to the same looking little button that I saw in Reconstruction. This is the export import button in this view. And I'm going to choose import evaluation form and then hit the browse button and take myself to that folder that I had on my desktop. Here are the 6 forms, and I'll just select one of these, hit the open button, and then click OK. And it's now importing that form into Evaluator, the list of Evaluator templates here. Okay, there it is. And if I double click on that, you see it's in draft mode right now by default. And here I can go to the, it can change the name if I want to. Maybe let's call this, if it'll click on that for me, there we go. Demo, and take this stuff off the end here. And I could give it a description if I want. Then I can go to the questions tab. Oh, you got to save before you switch tabs. It'll remind you of that like it just did for me. And then here are the questions developed by APCO Nina. And I can edit these questions. I can add questions, remove questions. So if I want to edit this question, for example, I would just highlight it by clicking on it and then hit the pencil up here in the right. And now I can change where this question is located. I could change the text of the question. I could give it a description. I could even change the scoring of the question. So this one's worth 200 points. Maybe I only want it to be worth 100 points. And there's a couple of other options down below here. You can change the responses. So this one is a yes, no, refused, NA. If I want to change those responses, I could. Let's just okay that one change that I made. You see that it changed the points. I can then add new questions if I want. I could remove a question if I don't want that one. Steve, any other thoughts or comments to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, these forms are just a starting point for you. If you guys have like ProQA, we do have a ProQA Aqua interface that kind of allows you to use the Aqua interface and then just go straight to the recordings. But this is for those of you who are using APCO. And it's also for things that maybe you're not covering. So if you want to have a specific checklist for, say, structure fires, like working structure fires, you can develop a specific checklist for them. The whole idea is this is supposed to be an evaluation after the fact. I actually learned from one person that some folks were actually trying to use this as a replacement for ProQA. Please don't. This is not to be used in a live dispatch environment, like as people are doing data entry into CAD, but it is good for QA after the fact, or sometimes I believe in some counties they actually do live QAs, and I've seen where they're actually listening in on the call as it's going and then doing live QAs, but that's because the supervisor's listening at the time. So we'll get into, now that you've developed the form, how do you use it and how do you schedule it?
Yep. Okay. So I'm going to save the changes that I made. Actually, the next thing I have to do is go back to my general tab, and I have to activate this form in order to be able to use it. Now it's available for adding to schedules. Now you could go through reconstruction and do a search and kind of cherry pick through the calls and manually select one and evaluate it from there. But the real power of an evaluation program is to keep it objective. And in order to help you with that, Inform has the ability to create a schedule. And what this does is it tells the system to automatically and randomly choose some recordings to be evaluated. So I'm going to go to the schedule, which is up here in the top right of the evaluation screen, and we can create multiple schedules in here. So let's create a new schedule. Call that webinar demo. And for most of you, you're going to select calls based on telephony data. That also includes radios, by the way, if you want to evaluate radio calls. For those of you who have CAD integrations, you can also create schedules based on CAD data. But for our purposes, let's do a telephony. Next, we are going to put in the evaluation criteria. So for example, how many calls per operator do you want to evaluate? Maybe you want to do 5 calls per evaluator per month. Now, for those of you who have screen recording as part of your Nice Inform systems, you can also check this box, which will prefer the random selection of calls that have associated screen recordings so that you can evaluate both the call and the recording of their screen at the same time. So you can check that if you like, and then go to next. And here's where we can add some filter criteria if we're looking for specific types of recordings or recordings that meet particular criteria. So Steve, I think one of the examples you gave me was maybe you don't want anything shorter than 30 seconds or something along those lines. But whatever filter criteria are useful for the schedule that you're building here, you can enter in here simply by adding a field, and here you have a drop down of all the various metadata for the recordings in the system. And this will vary by agency, by the way, depending on what kind of data we're getting from your call handling and radio systems. So whatever you have available will appear in that list, and you can select a field and choose an operator and a value and so forth. Okay, so I'm just going to remove that for our purposes today. Click on next. And then finally, what form do you want to be used for this schedule? Let's use that one that we just created and click next. And then we can select who is going to be assigned to do the evaluations. This is your evaluator. So for example, we could add this individual as our evaluator. Go to next, and then here we're going to select who are the operators or dispatchers that are going to be evaluated. And here we can select one or more individuals to include on my schedule. Go to next, and it will give you a quick review. Click add, and that will enable the schedule. Now the system will begin automatically and randomly selecting recordings that meet the criteria that you created, and it will start adding them to this list for the evaluators. So when they log into the system, they don't have to do any fancy searching. They just go right to the evaluator tab here, and they're going to see a list. Now in this case, I'm seeing a list of many evaluations, most of which are completed. So what you might want to do is change your filtering of the evaluation status. I only want to look at the created ones, or maybe the in progress ones if I had some that were already started. But let's go to the created ones. Those are the new ones, and hit search. And now I'm only going to see the ones that I need to get started on. And that's just going to show this one that I created here earlier this morning. To start evaluating this, all I have to do is double click on it. That will bring up the recording or group of recordings that meet the filter criteria here in the left pane, and then the evaluation form is over here on the right. I can select the call and begin playing it. And as I listen to the recording, I just answer the questions in the form. Did they do this? Yes. Did they do this? Yes. Did they do this? Well, no, they missed that one. Okay, they got that one. Maybe on this one, they were mostly correct, and my overall assessment is excellent. If I want, I can add some section notes down here at the bottom. Once I've completed scoring the call, I just have to hit save. Say yes to confirm. If I want, I can add notes here as well. Just create a note and say, okay. Say okay. And that adds the note to the evaluation. When I'm done, the next step and the final step for me as the evaluator is to progress the evaluation. Now, you can enter a review process into the system here, and what a review process does is it allows the person being evaluated to log into Nice Inform and review the evaluations, gives them an opportunity to add notes, and then mark that they have reviewed it. Or if you want, you can skip that process and go straight to completing it. That's your option, but let's show how you would do the review. I'm going to move the evaluation to the review stage. Are you sure? Yes. Okay. And now this evaluation is ready to be reviewed by the operator. So let me log out of Inform and log back in as an operator.
And while he's doing that, the reason why you may want to have a review process that's really up to your agency is maybe you want to have proof that your dispatchers have seen the evaluation, and you want to create an audit trail for that. So that way, if someone says, well, I never got any feedback about that call, you can say, well, actually, you did review that. The other thing is, sometimes dispatchers are harder on themselves than you might be just by hearing the audio. A lot of folks don't get to hear the audio. A lot of times the reviews are done in a vacuum, and then they're just like, I don't remember that call because it was like 2 weeks ago. So having the ability to have the audio available to them, as Mark's pulling that up right now, that's really helpful. So that way they can refresh their memory.
All right, thanks, Steve. So now I'm logged in as the operator who was evaluated. And you see this particular user account only has access to Evaluator, and maybe you want to set it up that way so they can't do search and replay and all that stuff. That's no problem. All I can do is review my evaluation, and here it is in the list. Double click it, and I'm going to see the same view that the evaluator saw. I see a copy of the recording over here on the left. I can click on that and press play and listen to the call. And while I'm listening, I can go over here on the right and I can look at the scores. Of course, I can't change them. They're all grayed out, but I can see what the scores were. When I'm done, I can go to the notes. If you give them permission to do this, they can add a note, and I can put my comments on here.
And that never happens.
Of course it does, Steve.
I mean, it just doesn't.
Okay, and then when I'm done, I progress the evaluation to the completed stage. Now you can also...
Yeah, and this is where a lot of times it falls apart, and people is they don't have, if you don't do the training on your for your folks, they don't know that they have to go and make it complete, or as Mark's about to allude to, you can send it back to the evaluator by using it to resend or
request to reconsider. Yeah. In those rare cases when somebody might want it to be reconsidered, they can request to reconsider, and then that'll send it back to the evaluator to review again and gives them the opportunity to adjust it. But I'll just hit complete on this, say yes, and everything is good on this one. Now, if I have more than one, I can go right back to the list here and proceed to the next evaluation. But in this case, I only had the one, so I'm done. And I can see that it's marked as complete now.
And right now, Mark's going to be moving back to look at the evaluator forms. One thing that I want to stress is the workflow is really up to the agency. And that's kind of why we want to set up a user group, so that way different agencies can talk to other user agencies to kind of compare notes and hopefully improve the product or give us ideas for changes.
All right, so once you've had a bunch of evaluations completed in the system, you have the opportunity to run some reports that will aggregate the data that's being collected in these evaluation forms so that you can look for trends or commonalities or areas which will help you gain some insight to help you improve what's going on in your center. So I would do that in the reporter module right here. So when you go to the reporter, the first thing it's going to show you is a dashboard. And this is the dashboard that I configured for myself. And right now it's showing me some call activity data. We're not going to get into call activity reports today, but maybe it's a topic which you might be interested in seeing us cover in the future. But I can also put evaluation reports onto my dashboard. So to do that, I'm going to go over to the reports section here. And here I see a list of all the reports that are in the system, and I can build new reports based on templates that are predefined in the system. So I'm going to create a new report. And you see that there are two types of templates. There are call data templates and evaluation templates. I'm going to do an evaluation report here. And there's a few different ways that Nice Inform will let you slice and dice the data being collected on these evaluation forms. So for example, maybe you want to see the average score per operator, or what's the average score per question, or both. Maybe you want to see scoring trends over the course of a month, or see lists of evaluations that are in certain statuses. So there are a number of options here. For our purposes, let's do a scoring trend per month report. Click OK with that one selected. And that will bring up the form where I can give it a name, give it a description if I like. If I want, I can make this report public by checking the box. If not, it'll only be visible to me. Next, I'm going to go to the Data tab. And here's where you can select what data should be included in this report, what time frame it's going to include. It could be all time, it could be the last month, or it could be a specific date range. And what users do you want to be included in this report? So I can select a few people from the list here. And then finally, which forms should be included in that report. So I might select that demo form that I created earlier, and then click Save. And now that's going to be on my list of available reports. Close that, and I see that right here in the list. And I can run that report right from here just by double clicking on it. I'm going to run one of the others because I know that there is some real data on one of these. So here you can see scoring trends for a couple of months from a few years ago. But then I can also take these reports and I can place them on the dashboard. So if I go back to my dashboards and I go to edit my dashboard by hitting the preferences in the top right, here I can see the reports which are on my current dashboard, and you can change the layout if you need to. Maybe I want to see more, or maybe I want to see less. That's up to you. But I'm going to go to this report that let's take average score per question and maybe my trend per month, and add those onto my dashboard and say OK. My dashboard will then refresh with the data from those reports.
Well, it's refreshing. The thing is, like, if you notice those little, he's moving quick, but those little arrows there where he's moving between the dashboard and the report, sometimes people miss that. So that's the other little tip and trick I have. And the nice thing about these reports is, like, if you set them to run for the last 30 days, then it's like a constant rolling, revolving schedule. So, I mean, I know that we're getting short on time, so, but if you guys have further questions about the reporting, we can always ask, reach out to you guys one-on-one. And at this point, I think we got to turn it over to Emily.
Yeah, thank you, Steve and Mark. And thank you to everyone who stayed with us. Like we said, we went a little long. There's a lot of content that we want to cover and give to you. So, but that wraps up the main portion of our session today. And before we close the discussion, I have one more poll question that I'd like to present to our audience. It's specific to next generation 911. It's something, if you've been to our website recently or read any of our blogs, it's something that we've mentioned a lot. We believe it's very important to be proactive when addressing it. So I'll pop that poll question up on the screen now. And it reads, where is your center in transitioning to NG 911? You're already doing it now, you're implementing it soon, starting to explore it, or you haven't even started. So if you could submit where you're at with that, we would love to see the context of your situation. Got a lot of answers coming in. Awesome. Okay, I'll give a few more seconds. Awesome. All right, I'll close it out right now. Thank you to those who were able to participate. Let me share the results there. So we've got a lot of us starting to explore it. Second most, implementing it soon. Good to see some of you are already doing it now. But those of you who haven't yet, please consider us. We're like I said, we're trying to show our knowledge and share our knowledge in this space, and we love to work with you in doing so. So let me take that off my screen. I'll put up our closing slide. Make sure I'm sharing the right one. All right, so this is our contact information. As I mentioned, Steve, Mr. Sharp covers New York and Pennsylvania, and then our other public safety sales director, John McDonald, he's on in the background today, and I'm sure many of our attendees know him. He covers Ontario, New Jersey, Delaware, Vermont, and Massachusetts. So please feel free to contact them if you'd like to chat more about what we discussed today. Also up on that contact slide is our website, our general phone number, and then our social media handles. We emphasize our posting on LinkedIn a lot. So if you are on any of those channels, please feel free to check us out. Like Steve said, we don't have any time to answer any of your questions that you submitted. I saw there were quite a few. I promise that we'll get back to you shortly and answer those questions for you to provide some clarity. So thank you to everyone who attended our session today and participated. We hope you were able to take away some new ideas on how you can use your Nice Informed solution. And it's one last reminder to answer the 3-question survey that pops up on your screen when you exit. Thank you to Mark and Steve for sharing their knowledge with us today. And thank you to everyone who joined us. So have a good one.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.